the announcement that Bernard Muir is going to be stepping down at the end of this year. So obviously, you look at what Stanford on the football. Obviously that affects all of athletics, but obviously we're a football show, so we're going to talk about the football part of it. They're coming off 4 straight 3-9 seasons. So the first 2 years of Troy Taylor, the last 2 years of David Shaw. They just named Andrew Luck the GM. There's a lot of other player movement. Like where's your head at with where Stanford is right now?
I don't. I have a recommendation, but I also don't know where they're at. Right? I go back to my favorite thing I've ever learned from content coming out of Stanford was David Shaw's TED Talk. We'll link it in the newsletter for today because it's so good. Any fan base should watch it, but especially a Stanford fan base. And ultimately, he talked about the beginning of the Harbaugh era and then eventually what he took over and led to unprecedented heights. And he talked about how the modality was, let's go find 25 elite athletes who also are elite and value the classroom. That's not that hard, folks. I think it's easier than if you're recruiting at USC, if you're recruiting at Alabama, if you're recruiting at Georgia, because there's a certain demo that fits. Challenge now is that those premier players, yes, they value the degree. And I think there's a world where it's like, come play 3, get your degree and get out and go transfer to another school if you want to go do that. Like, I think there's a sell there. But ultimately, like, Stanford isn't winning those battles with the amount of success that they had in the past. Okay, why? Well, number one, you go to the record. Number two, you go to the games there. They're not like the most electric environments. I don't know the details of their collective. I know it exists. I know it's competitive. I know that from talking to people over the last year and a half there. That's where I net out, I think, for them. Of like, they have to me, in this moment in time, because I'm a big Bernard Muir fan. He's been a friend. He's been somebody that I've been able to work really closely with. I don't know the details of his resignation, if it is a true resignation where he wants to go to greener pastures in his life. It is a forced resignation. Like, I don't know any of the details around that. I haven't dug into that and probably won't, because it doesn't matter. Because I want to honor the man that he was and what he led Stanford to do, which is many things. He oversaw one of the greatest runs in the history of the world. He also had to navigate one of the greatest fallouts in the history of college sports, which is the Pac-12 and Stanford, right? Stanford win more Olympics in every Olympics than like a majority of countries, right? So like, I think it's hard to lump like his tenure into today's reality of conference realignment. Like, they had to go find a place. They chose to not rebuild the new look Pac-12. They chose to go to the only lifeline they really had, which is the ACC, for minimal media rights money, but their athletes, they told Bernard Muir they wanted to go play and compete at that level. Okay, cool. So that's the reality. That's where we sit here today. Ultimately, though, today, Stanford has to make a choice of if they want to go all in my opinion, from the outside looking in. Like, do they want to throw down in the way that Texas is throwing down, in the way that USC has committed millions of dollars to a front office, to recruiting, to staffing? Like, that's the decision. And I hope they do, because I still think their model can work. Okay, let's spin it forward. Okay, who should they hire as the next AD? I think, again, I go back to that TED Talk. They need to go back, just like I said about USC. USC, go back to the way we recruited when I was at USC and modernize it. I think that's what SC is doing right now with Chad Savage and Lincoln Riley and company. Stanford, they need to modernize that TED Talk. So how do you do it? You do it with energy. You do it with canvassing around the country. I think you do it with staff hires. I think you have to add a little bit more muscle to where they sit. And as the AD, are they going to come in and try to compete to hang on to the old model of this is the premier academic institution, of course, this is a premier athletic institution, of course, period? Or do they say, and we're in a new landscape, how are we going to compete in that? Like, you need a thought leader. You need somebody who knows college athletics, but is a visionary. You know where I'm going with this. Like, you need, to me, sitting right there, it's Carter Henderson. I mean, this is a guy who's been at all these places. He's been at a variety of different big-time institutions, knows what drives revenue, knows what drives story, knows marketing, and has lived the experience of conference realignment. They may not be their first choice. I don't know who any of their choices are, but the answer is not to go get somebody from private equity to run your institution. And it's not to get just a lifelong, 30-year plus college administrator. Like, you have to me, put your foot down and make a pivot here and go for it. Because you can. Like, Stanford could be in the same conversations as Alabama. They once were. It wasn't that long ago when they were drilling Iowa in the Rose Bowl, when they were playing in meaningful games, where they were selling out their stadium. So we've seen it can happen there. I just want to feel the hardcore commitment. I feel like what we hear often now is, yeah, it's competitive. We're in the conversation. We're in the game. Like, I want you to lead the game. You're in the Silicon freaking Valley. Like, Stanford could be leading the charge in NIL, in revenue share, and all of the things with academic excellence and athletic excellence, the location of the campus, all the things that you can provide in NIL and like legit name, image, and likeness in the community that you're in. Like, I want to feel that from Stanford. That's what I want to feel. I'm on the table for Carter Henderson. I'm sure there's many other capable candidates that are phenomenal. Can't wait to hear some of those names. When they do hire someone, we will do our best to effort to bring them on.
Yeah, I think the craziest stat for me about the Stanford team. So last year, and just how far they've gone from where they were. They had 11 rushing touchdowns last year, all of them from the quarterbacks. Not a single one from a running back. Now, both of those quarterbacks, Ashton Daniels and Justin Lamson, both went in the portal. I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. Like, they had Elijah Brown, who showed some promise last year when he was healthy. So I think on that level, like they have a guy. So like whereas you might say, oh my God, both of the quarterbacks who played the most last year are both gone. That's not always necessarily a bad thing. Now, Ilike Eominer, the wide receiver who like really burst out, like he's at the NFL Combine this week, so they're gonna have to replace him. But Emmett Mosley was a guy that, like, especially in that Louisville game last year, really shined. So like they have some pieces, but is what they need to get back to the old school Stanford, the Stanford that we saw under Jim Harbaugh and the majority of David Shaw's tenure there, or is it a whole new breed of
I think it's a
what that
combination, dude.
is?
I think it's a combination because that era wanted to come back. I've been around a lot of those players when I'm ever on campus, and they got such pride. I mean, there's a reason Andrew Luck took the job to be the GM, right? Like, they've got a pride and a belief, and I think that it can happen here. I think Troy Taylor's plan when he got the job is the right one. Of, okay, it's going to be rough our first 2 years, but once we get guys that are in their second and third year here, they're not going to want to leave, and you create an environment there where guys are like, yeah, this degree is insane. Let me, at minimum, stay 3. I'll give you an example. I'm talking to one of the biggest recruits in the country. I don't want to say the position because it'll give it away. And he is, from what I have gleaned, he would love to go to Stanford. He'd love to go to Stanford. He'd also love to play at Alabama. But he knows right now he's probably not ready. So I think there's a world in Stanford recruiting. Like, you go get the 3-4-star player who values academics, who's a heck of a player. You play him early. You develop the daylights at him. You know you're getting these guys for 3 years. Like, you're kind of like Ohio State, up until this past year, it was 3 and out forever because they were so talented. They went to the NFL. Stanford, to me, it's like 3 and out. If you want to leave, we'll prepare you for that. But that is the model. And that was the vision that Troy Taylor had when he showed up. And I agree with it. Now, like, are you competitive in the landscape of recruiting? And that, to me, is where I want to feel their energy. I don't know that in the NIL game. I know they're in it. Are they going to spend $4 million on a quarterback? Do they think they need to? Because they can get a kid like you referenced, coming out of Southern California, Elijah Brown, out of Mater Dei, who's a premier high school, to go up there because he values academics. He values being in the home state. And I'm sure he's getting some sort of NIL deal. Like, there's a world where that exists too. But either way, like, I think I want to feel Stanford as a more attractive place. Big picture. Like, that's what I want. I want the marketing of that place. I want to feel that place again. Because when you turn it on, and I've called a lot of games there, as you know, when you go to those 3-9 seasons, that's not college football. Like, that's not what it should be at Stanford in terms of the people in that stadium. I think this year was a big jump from year one with Troy Taylor. Like, they went to Syracuse. They got a huge road win. Like, they were competitive in the majority of their games. big expectations, I think, coming into year 3 for them. But ultimately, for the next AD, I think they got to make a real decision. And what I would recommend is go for it. Like, why not? It's not like you don't have the resources. Go for it and make the country feel it versus academic athletic excellence. Like, no. You can do everything, because it's true. You can do it all there. Christian McCaffrey did it all there. Bryce Love did it all there. Andrew Luck did it all there. Kevin Hogan did it all there. Like, you can do it all there. You can do it all there. I still believe in that place. I wish them the best. And this was fun, Jim. We got to go for it a little bit. So let us know your thoughts in the comments.